bevy of taxi drivers coming in at some stage. Perhaps stay quiet for a little while when they come in, but let's hope that's not going to happen anyway. Okay, well, we can start the meeting. And first of all, have we any apologies, please?
Yes, we have apologies from Councillor Serika, Abdul Lois, and Shahid Yunis.
Thank you. Minutes of previous meeting. I gather, if Ian, you might have something to say about that. Oh, Paul it was, wasn't it? Yeah, sorry, yeah.
Thank you, Chair. On page 9 of the minutes, I request it should say, Paul Fishwick said that journeys need to be seamless and not end at a boundary. Therefore, officers at a senior level and the relevant executive members should work to promote the use of Reading's bus lanes by Wokingham drivers. The officer, Sean Murphy, agreed that it would be taken away, and then that action became the resolution number 3 on page 10.
Okay. Anybody else got any points on the take Ian and then
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A comment made also on under item number 16, top of page 9 in the minutes. In response to a comment, Julia O'Brien stated that the taxi and private hire policies are being reviewed and will be brought for consideration to the January meeting of the committee. Am I missing something, because I'm not seeing them on the agenda for tonight's committee meeting?
any officer view on that? No, yeah, Rachel, yes, what would you like to say?
Yeah, I was going to raise the same point, and also actually in the forward programme, it says that we'll review the consultation in March. So I don't know if Julia's got an update, because I think Julia's probably the one that's done the most work on it. And the other point on that is whether the taxi liaison group will have a chance to actually contribute to that consultation as well. Thanks.
Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Would you like me to
Yes, please.
update you on that? Yeah, thank you. Yeah, apologies. I thought we had put something out to members. Unfortunately, the policy, the draft policy, is not ready to come to this committee, obviously, which is why it's not here. There was quite a lot of a flurry of activity with the lawyer who's drafting the policy for us before Christmas. And it was obvious that we needed to do some more work on it. So that is what we are currently doing. So there will need to be an amendment to the forward plan to bring the draft policy to the next meeting, and then it'll go out to consultation then after that with the trade. Thank you. I hope that clarifies things.
Paul, one second.
Yes, thank you. I do have actually a question about the bus lanes as well, because the action was taken away. And do we have any update progress from officers of what's happened?
Yes.
Chair, if I may, I can confirm that a letter went to Reading, went in my name, about the bus lanes. So far, I had no reply, and as and when I get a reply, I'll make sure committee members are aware of what they say.
Okay, thank you. Any further points? Paul again?
Sorry, Chair. It's actually the item which Sarah Kerr raised in relation to the previous minutes of June 2021. We have had an update from Jennifer Lee on the 28th of October. I think that was sent to all members of this committee. But I've got some further questions on that. It refers to the freezing of the fees and refunding, and the Licensing and Appeals Committee can only recommend it, not approve it, it would appear. And the question is therefore which relevant body can actually approve it, and if this has been done. So my question is, following on from this committee's recommendation to freeze the previous year's fees and refund those who've already paid, which body is going to, which body is this going to for formal approval? We're talking about 9,000 here, and I understand that could be delegated to an officer at director level.
Do we have a response to that? Yes.
Again, through you, Chair. Yeah, unfortunately, what had happened in previous years and last year, obviously before my time, but as I understand it, the director did use delegated authority to via the money to ensure that the fees could be frozen. This year, however, the council was looking to make £2 million of the savings, and so the director didn't feel it was in his gift to make that environment. So the issue will be before full council in February, where there'll be an opportunity to recommend that the recommendation of this committee is followed, and it'll be for full council then to decide whether they want to alter their budget or not.
Okay.
As I understand it, I have legal representation here tonight who can maybe confirm that that's I've got that right.
Because we were informed, Chair, that by the monitoring officer it was going to go to executive in November, but that didn't happen. So it's definitely going to go to full council in February 2022.
The budget will be on full council in February. Again, I defer to anybody from legal who wants to just confirm that that's in fact correct.
Thank you, Chairman. This is Sean O'Connor speaking. I'm your head of legal services on that. What I can add on to this is just building on what our Deputy Monitoring Officer sent to you on the 27th of October, which this body can make a decision to reduce the fees, but then the question comes in respect to a mid-year change, but the question comes to who will then fund this. Now, I understand from Stephen that the officer hasn't, the director is unable to vary that amount in year. But I'm not able to add anything further about the reduction for this year. I know in respect to next year's budget, then what Stephen said was correct, that it would go to full budget in February, but that is in respect to next year's budget. So sorry, Chair, I'm unable to give you an answer in relation to any changes in year this year.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, Chair. So this comes back to the very point I was making earlier about the 9,000 in this year's budget. It appears to me that it's being kicked into the long grass. So where is this going?
Do we have a response to that? I would remind you that we're actually at this minute looking at the confirming the minutes rather than taking full questions with regard to that. But I'll accept from this one.
Yeah, but this is an ongoing situation from June 2021 that has not been resolved yet.
Yeah. Well, it would be better if you actually put it in as a member's question in relation to issues like that, perhaps, and we could have it on the agenda and deal with it more properly.
Well, I was hoping to get an answer here tonight.
Yeah. Do we have a response to that?
I think, Chair, the response is simply that in year the council has got the council had set its budget. In year, this committee recommended that the fee should be frozen. However, the money isn't there to be able to do that, and so that wasn't enacted. But there is an opportunity to look at it before the budget is set for next year to make that alteration. That's best that I can say. But I think there is also a report on the committee tonight that also deals with taxi licensing as well, and it's coming up later, so we might be able to pick it up then.
Lindsay, what is this still related to the agenda?
This is related to this point because I'm concerned that we made a recommendation to do something as a committee, and nothing formal has actually been done, and we've not received a formal response that it's not going to happen other than in this meeting, and yet we're being told that we can't do it. There should have been in the procedures a formal response to this committee to say, we've looked at this particular issue and we're sorry, X, Y, and Z. And it hasn't. This is just a complete break, and I think is unconstitutional, to be honest. And I think that this is not appropriate. And I think a number of us on this committee are not happy that at the time when the taxi drivers are struggling their most, we're still charging them an increased figure, even though we as a committee had said to freeze it. And I think it is very, very much inappropriate. And I want it minuted that we have an objection to what's gone on.
As I just mentioned, really, strictly speaking, with issues like this, you should actually put it in as a member's question. Because if you do that, we get it in advance, and I have the opportunity of getting the office to respond, so you can get a proper answer this evening, as opposed to having to put them in a position that they are now from that point of view. I recognise that, but that we do need to be careful about. This is dealing with the minutes of the previous meeting as it stands, not the actual factors related to that. And can I first of all sign these as a true record then, please, with the appropriate amendments as talked about? Okay, all those in favour, please. Thank you. If we can move on to any declarations of interest. No. No public questions. No members' questions. So we can move to item 22. That's the fees and charges. Who's going to introduce this one to us, please? Officers.
I'm happy to introduce this item. This is the annual set of fees and charges which, following this committee and its consideration of them, would go forward to the budget setting process in February as part of the council's overall fees and charges schedule. So in your paper is a list of the fees and charges which relate to licensable activities, and they're split into two appendices. The first appendix is those which the fee is set by government regulation or statute, so there's no opportunity for the council to vary those. And then Appendix B is what we call the discretionary fees, which are where the council decides what the appropriate level of fee is, usually based on recovering the costs of administering the application or managing and enforcing the scheme, or a combination of both. It varies slightly depending on which type of fee it is. The proposal, as you'll see, is to keep the fees the same for 2022-23 as they are for 21-22, for the principal reason that the licensing service is returning in-house on the 1st of April, and because the fees are primarily set on a cost recovery basis, before we were to make any change to the fees, it would be necessary to review cost base for the service, which may be slightly different in future as it was this year. So it seems appropriate not to recommend any change to the fees, even to recommend an inflation-based increase. The proposal is to keep them the same as we transfer the licensing process from Public Protection Partnership to the Council's own service from April.
Thank you. Any questions, members? Lindsay.
Oh, sorry, I hate wearing the mask, but never mind. There's a question that follows back from what we've just been talking about when we had the discussion about the phrasing of the taxi fees. Turn to page 25. We've got vehicle licenses, Hackney, carriages, etc. The figures that are in there, the 290 et al., they're the figures for 21-22 being moved forward to 22-23. We asked for a freeze on what was the previous figure. You mentioned that there would be an opportunity at the budget meeting in February, can we, as the committee here, move that to have that the freeze figure that we wanted to have for this 6-month period move forward into 22-23, so that it's the revised freeze figure, and I can't quite remember what it was, but it's about 30 or 40 pounds lower. And is that something that we can do tonight? Can we ask for that to be reduced, or is that something that has to happen at the budget meeting in February?
Do you have a report on that with regards to that, whether we can actually make a proposal at this time, but where does it go through from there?
Chairman, if I could come in on that point.
Yeah.
The answer to that question is yes. So the figure that you determined tonight would go into the budget for 22-23. Now the question would be is that whether or not that new figure that you're setting, does that cover the cost of the service, and as the figure being proposed by the officers should be the cost recovery amount. This again means that the figure you would be putting forward would require a subsidy from council tax general funds. So if we are looking, if the motion and by this committee is to reduce the sum, then that can only be a recommendation to council, because council is going to have to find the subsidy from somewhere else to pay for that. So to answer the question, it can be done, but it would then go to for council to actually approve the payment, because the money has to be found from somewhere. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, you've raised a good point, because the figures here are based on £59 per hour, and that was based upon the PPP structure costs, which I can understand that's your starting point. But I haven't seen a recommendation anywhere, although I suspect it would be work that will be ongoing, that we need to work out what our new financial per hour figure would be during 22-23, because otherwise we'll be based on 59. And I ask a hypothetical question here, but if, for example, because we've become more efficient and our prices charges aren't £59, but turns out to be, say, £56.50, what then happens about charges based upon the overall costs? Because if its cost based was too high, for example, then how do we go about dealing with that? Because then we would have been, in theory, overcharging. So I think we've got quite an awkward position here, in as much as the council doesn't actually know that from 1st of April what his actual costs will be per hour. It is currently based upon what has been derived from the PPP, and one of the main reasons we were looking at moving the structure was improved efficiency and more local linkage with people. So can I have a comment on that, please?
Yes, I'll be happy to make a comment on that. In principle, your analysis is completely correct, I believe. If the Appendix B costs, which are largely based on cost recovery, it is based on the hourly rate, usually a multiple of numbers of hours. You'll see some of the fees are referred to in terms of £59 per hour, depending on how many hours are required to perform the task. So the principle is correct. When we assess what our cost base is on an hourly rate, that should influence the choice of fees and charges going forward. I believe you're correct that one of the drivers for bringing services in-house was increased efficiency, although I don't recall that there was a suggestion that that would necessarily mean that the hourly cost per service was cheaper, just that it was more efficient and more local. So, but that remains to be seen once the service is established from April, and we know what the budget forecasts are for the service in terms of its cost base.
Okay.
Just for following through, the efficiency could mean they do it in 4 hours instead of 5 hours. That could have a knock-on effect and such like. So what I'm concerned about is that we're being asked to recommend fees to the full council, and it is based upon what might not be, or is probably not going to be, the actual cost of providing the services. So I feel a bit uncomfortable about proposing to full council something which is potentially wrong. It could be too high, it could be too low, we don't know, and there's inflation coming through, and whilst you mentioned that you haven't taken that into account, we could have the reverse situation, that the actual cost of doing it is more, in which case we then have a deficiency in the budget. We're in the same position of what we've been talking about with the taxi fees. So I like to understand how that is going to be presented to full council in February, because at the moment I'm not sure whether what we're actually proposing is accurate or not.
Bill, have you got any response to that?
Sorry, did you ask me?
Yes.
Yeah, it just seems to me that what Lindsay is asking is for us to pluck a figure out of the air, which we're unable to do, obviously. We could actually get it wrong. We could be needing to put a higher figure in, and we could need to put a lower figure in. But it's all supposition at the moment. We don't know quite what the costs are going to be. So how could we get it, you know? Yeah, but what I'm saying is, what's your suggestion? Do we pluck it out of the air and just say, well, we're going to put this figure in? We need to put a figure in.
Okay, can I take Rachel?
Thank you. Just coming back to Lindsay's original proposal, I'd certainly second any proposal that froze the taxi fees at the previous year's level. Now, I think, you know, going back a bit, I think I'm not sure this committee is being taken seriously enough. So we had a consultation from taxi drivers and others last year that we reviewed in March, which was after the budget was set. So that was the start of this. Then we, as we've heard earlier, we made a recommendation in June, which the executive completely ignored. It didn't go anywhere, despite being voted on by this committee. And then if we're freezing fees for next year, the only logical step then from this committee is to have that lower level of taxi driver fees, because otherwise, if we've already agreed that we think it should be a lower level, if we're keeping that the same, it should therefore be at that lower level going forward. It's the only logical step. In terms of the cost of that, appreciate the issues with the cost base going forward, but we had roughly calculated that would be around £9,000, and that is not, I believe, a material sum for this council. As I say, it was something that was voted on by this committee formally and minuted. So I would second a proposal that keeps, for the fees and charges going forward, I appreciate that would mean as potentially a subsidy from other funds, but that would keep that taxi driver fees at the level frozen from the previous year.
Are there any other members that want to support that proposal? Okay, any against? The proposal is then put forward, but I think that what we need to do with regards to this particular item where we're saying taking it forward for consideration, that we add a rider that it's taking into account the changes that will be made when PPP comes in-house. Would that be something, Phil, because Phil, you're responsible for that area, that you would be able to carry forward on that basis?
Yeah, I think that's the right way to go. Yeah, I'm quite happy with that.
Okay, members happy with that so far? Thank you. Okay, now any other questions on this particular agenda item? Yeah.
Excuse me, as a kind of new council, I just wonder what is going to happen with the previous years then. I'm very unclear about that reduction. What's the action there?
Well, as far as I'm aware, it's still bouncing around in the amongst the officers and it's about to be. Yeah. Yeah, we've got yeah, from the licensing side, have you got any views on that, please? No?
Sorry, Chair, can I just be clear what the question was again? I'm not really clear what's being asked. Sorry.
Can you repeat what?
Yeah, so back in June, which I think Rachel has mentioned, and again Paul, is we voted on the reduction in the fees. That has gone on. We've had a discussion about that this evening, but I'm very unclear about what the subsequent action is in order to achieve that for the previous year.
Chair, I think after the last meeting, I undertook to go away and clarify the situation, and the Deputy Monitoring Officer wrote to all members to clarify what the position was. The issue was taken to the executive and taken to the director, who determined that there wasn't the money in the budget this year to deal with the recommendation. There is a possibility in February, when the budget's being set for next year, that a recommendation is put to council to subsidise fees for next year. I think that's where we've got to.
Okay. Lindsay.
Yes, I just want to ask for clarification. We've just voted on that we give the forward on the frozen figure, which we don't have at hand, but I'm looking at page 25, which is the Hackney Carriages section. We've got the vehicle licenses section, which starts with 290. I have a feeling the figure was about 252 or 260. I can't remember because I haven't got my past papers. So what we've just voted on is there will be figures on pages 25, 26 and 27, certainly some of which will be a lower figure than it is currently in this table, and that the revised figures will then be incorporated in your appendix and then put forward to the budget meeting in February. That is my understanding. Is that correct?
The officers, are you aware of that situation?
Well, as I prepared the report, I'll come in on that one. The figures in the table are the ones officers are currently proposing to put forward to the budget setting for council meetings. So if this committee wishes that to be reduced for these certain categories, then I believe the committee needs to give officers direction to do that.
Well, we just had a vote that was 6-3 in favour of doing the freezing. So the committee has, by a majority, recommended that, and the chair has just given that with the note about the rider about the figure used. So what I'm just saying is that we're expecting you to modify your appendix from page 25, 26, 27. There's certain of those figures that were modified by a previous discussion of the committee back in June. And I don't have those figures at hand. I don't know if any in the group on the council committee here has got that. So instead of 290 on page 255, it could be that it's 252. You know, there's a certain figure that we had that was the frozen figure. And because we don't have reference to it, I can't remember it. But that's what we recommended in the summer. And that's what we wanted through. So we've got the situation that this financial year, we note that it wasn't taken account of, but we're now looking to do is to forward it into the 22-23 so that that's the lower figure. And that's what I'm expecting from our discussion that we had just now and the vote to what will be moved forward. And it's not all the figures that are in page 25, 26, 27, it's specific ones. And I can't remember what they were, but that we need to go back to the June records to know what we particularly voted on, and that's what we've just continued tonight.
Bill.
Yeah, perhaps put me right. Should this not go to the executive before it goes to any budget meeting?
Yeah, I think it probably does have to.
Chair, if I can come in on that again. So sorry, I missed the vote just now. It was so quick, and I didn't actually see that happening. So my apologies on that. But my understanding is that you voted, and you voted to agree the fees, but substitutes different fees for the pages that the councillor just mentioned. So I presume that we would be able to, the officers will be able to find those fees. That's my first point I would raise on that. In relation to the Councillor Soane's question, if we've now reduced the fees and effectively we're subsidising, again, somebody needs to find that money. So that money needs to come from somewhere, whether or not be an executive decision, an executive pot, or ultimately thought through to full council. So that point is yet to be determined. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay. Any further queries on this agenda item? Right. Lindsay, do you want to repeat what your proposal was?
Yes, the proposal I made was that back in June this year, we asked to freeze the taxi licensing fees, and there were certain specific ones that we asked in that period, and that what we've asked tonight is that we go back to that figure for 22-23 for those specific taxi licensing fees that were mentioned in the June 21 proposals.
Chair, if I may.
Sorry, if I write, so the committee is proposing to go back to the figures that were proposed in June 2021.
To freeze the,
which is
but there were only certain of the license fees that we asked to freeze.
So certain license fees that were agreed at the June 2021 meeting to be put forward for the next budget.
And it specifically and only deals with taxis.
Okay.
So, Chair, can I just clarify? The officer's report will go to council, but with a recommendation from this committee that they be adjusted to look at subsidising the taxi fees for next year, rather than the officer's report being adopted based on tonight's recommendation. Thank you.
Yeah, just for clarification, it's the 23rd of June 2021, and it's item 7.
Right. Yeah. Does that make sense for giving us? You don't have to do that now. Yep. Okay. So can we then take a vote on agreeing the recommendations that we have on item 22 with the changes that we've recommended? Can I see those in favour of that agreement, please? Thank you. And those against? Okay, that's carried. Might move then to item 23. Who's going to be introducing this one, please?
Kevin, that would be me. It's Moira speaking.
Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Officers received an email on the 29th of November from Mr. Mahmoud Barouzi requesting that consideration be given to amending the Hackney Carriage Tariffs. The email was supported by a petition signed by 31 other drivers. Officers also then wrote to the trade to see if there was wider support for these proposals, and we received 34 responses. 18 of those people had already signed the petition. The information about those responses is all set out in Appendix B to the report this evening. current set of fees have been in place since 2010. There was a minor change made to them in 2014. And the business case from the trade is set out in Appendix A and on paragraphs 1.3 to 1.6 of the report. Basically, the proposals from the trade are seeking to bring forward the time the tariffs would change from one tariff to the next, from 11 p.m. to 10:30 p.m. And they're looking to change the flag rate from 863 yards and 190 seconds, 440 yards and 150 seconds, and the rate from 167 yards and 38 seconds to 120 yards and 30 seconds. Those figures may seem a bit abstract to you, but what they mean in essence is that a 5-mile journey on a Friday evening at 10 p.m. would currently cost you £12.50. If you accepted the proposal, it would cost circa £16.90. The other changes that they've asked for is to increase the filing charges from £10 and £50 to £15 and £75 respectively, and also to change the charge for an extra passenger from where the vehicle is carrying more than 4 people from 50p to £2 per passenger. That was the change that was discussed at the 2014 meeting. Members are asked to consider the business case that's been put forward by the trade and the reasons for that increase being requested, and then decide if they are willing to support that variation. If members are minded to support the variation, any changes would need to be subjected to a statutory consultation as set out in Section 65 of the Local Government Act 1976. If the members are minded to vary the tariffs, then you will need to decide if you want to consult on the proposal put forward by the trade or perhaps an alternative. Members will always need to balance the needs of trade to run an economically viable business, the needs of residents to charge a fair amount. It should also be noted, of course, that the fares that are set would be the maximum that the taxis could charge, and there was always an opportunity to negotiate a lower fare. If members are minded to go ahead, then we are seeking delegated authority to the Director of Place and Growth to undertake the consultation. The dates that we're seeking to do that is from the 2nd to the 16th of February. That does seem quite close and quite short, but we are mindful of bringing a report back then to the March meeting if any objections are received. If no objections are received, then the variations would come into force at a point that would be set out in the notice if you're minded to agree. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. When I discussed this with the officers previously, I think somebody was going to perhaps set out an example of, say, what a 5-mile trip was likely to cost and the percentage increase that the passengers might have to pay with regard to that. Has anybody done any work on that basis?
Chairman, we do have some information. There's some information in the report which explains. There's one line in the report which will explain to you what a 5-mile charge would look like.
All right. Okay. Yes.
Yeah. And that equates to roughly a 34% increase. We do also have some numbers. If members are looking to vary it by a different amount, then obviously we'd do those calculations and be able to provide alternatives should that be the way that members wish to proceed.
Okay, thank you. Right, members, take them in order there. Paul and then Lindsay. And then Paul.
Thank you, Chair. I've got one comment, which is page 36, paragraph 1.12, and that's the consultation period, which is only 14 days. That does seem a trifle short, and I would recommend that that is extended by 1 week, so it's 21 days.
When I was discussing this with the officers beforehand, one of the problems we had with that was that it pushes everything back to the point that we may not be able to have a meeting prior to the year end, and that would create issues from that point of view. Can I just go back to the officers that were discussing that? What's the issues if we try and add an extra week? Please?
Chairman, just to say that the next meeting is scheduled for the 2nd of March, if we were to push back the deadline until the 23rd, it would mean the agenda would have been issued on the Tuesday and the consultation wouldn't close until the Wednesday. That's the issue that we had.
Yeah.
We also looked at trying to potentially bring the consultation start date forward, but the consultation starts with the placing of the advert in the newspaper, and really we don't think we could get that done before next week. The deadline for that is a Monday.
Right. Chair, my concern is members of the public not seeing this 14 days is short. Understand that, yes, you've got a very tight deadline on the other end. Is there any way of trying to work around this?
Well, just how are the public notified about this? Can you tell us? Is it by a newspaper?
So the intention would be to place a public notice in the newspaper, and I do accept the point that perhaps not everybody looks at those. We'd also put something onto the website and the Public Protection website and the Wokingham website. And I don't know if there's a community panel or anybody like that we can write to. We could try and do that as well. And clearly, we'd also write to all the members of the trade.
That's normally the procedure that we take. Well, if it goes out on one day, I can hardly believe that anybody's going to pick up a newspaper that they have read 3 weeks ago and suddenly decide that they wanted to respond to it. Surely they would actually do it within a few days or so, with regards to if they feel they needed to say something. Can I take Lindsay for that?
Okay. Can I just check? I'm trying to work it through. Are the figures that are in the document here those proposed by the trade, or has there been a discussion between you and the trade on these figures?
Councillor Ferris, I can confirm that those are the figures from the trade. Members don't have to accept the trade's recommendation. You could come up with your own alternative proposal, and we would go out to consult on that, but we can only consult on one proposal. We can't go out with an either or kind of consultation.
I note it is 8 years since they had a review, and I know they were saying that they'd wanted one. Okay, thanks on that.
Okay, Rachel.
Thank you. I just had a few comments and then a question. So, I mean, I support this tariff increase. I mean, there's not been a major review actually since 2010, so it just brings the charges in line with inflation, just like any other business is able to do. I do respect that the trade waited, because I know they wanted to do this before, but due to COVID, they respected their customers and they've waited till now to request this. And we've said many times about how massively the trade have suffered recently. I think the point about it being a maximum tariff is very important. You know, it's up to the drivers themselves what they actually choose to charge. It does concern me, obviously it says in the report that a rise would disproportionately affect disabled people and older people. But I think overall we can't ask the trade to carry on with a fare structure that hasn't been reviewed for over 10 years and actually could result in the disappearance of some of these services altogether. Just one question, do we know how this new structure compares with any neighbouring authorities' structures?
Chairman, so I could answer that for you. And most of these comparison sites look at a 2-mile journey. A 2-mile journey currently in Reading would cost £8, £7.40 in West Berkshire, £6.50 in Bracknell. South Oxfordshire don't set any fees. So if you went with the proposal as set out, the Wokingham 2-mile journey would be £8.10, so slightly higher than the neighbouring authority.
Okay, Paul, do you want to come back in?
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's about the consultation. It's not about somebody picking up a newspaper and then looking at it 3 weeks later. It's actually getting the communication around the residents so they are aware, and then they can submit any comments that they wish to submit. We've got to give people sufficient time to do that. And 3 weeks is normally a minimum period of time. 14 days is, to me, too short.
Michael.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, just really a bit of clarification, I think, more than anything. The 14 days is the minimum. It's not actually given anything more than 14 days, so I kind of guess we could change that. But I'm just wondering if it's increased from 14 days to whatever, 21 days, 28, whatever it is, will that be limited by PERDA coming up, which will be sort of in March sometime? I'm not sure when that is. Maybe Sean O'Connor can answer that. Thanks.
Yeah, that was one of the factors that we were taking into account with regards to that. Yes. Yes.
Chair, if I can come in on that.
Yeah.
PERDA or the heightened sensitivity period, as we now call it, that doesn't restrict consultations. It doesn't prevent it. It's a certain, but from the council's perspective, there may be times that we may not want to do a particular consultation in that area because of the distractions due to an election. So it doesn't prevent it. It just means that this could be conflated with the sensitivity period in advance of the election. So we do try to avoid that because we like things to be considered on their merits. So we do try to, but there's nothing preventing this going into the PERDA period. Thank you, Chair.
Sean, I think the discussion we had was that it's not that the consultation would fall into the PERDA period, but potentially the meeting where the decision would be made would fall into the PERDA period, potentially.
Chair, yeah, same answer, Chair.
Okay. Lindsay, then Paul.
I've not been involved in this particular type of aspect of license fees. Can you give us a general view of what in practice happens through the process and towards the end, i.e. are the trade figures the ones that are accepted, or is there something else that happens as a normal basis?
Chairman, I'm not sure I fully understand the question, but the trader put in a proposal. This committee can choose to accept that proposal and go out to consult on it, or you could come up with an alternative proposal where you would say a 5% increase, a 10% increase, whatever members would feel that they're comfortable with, and then we would go out to consultation on that.
Right.
You don't have to go with the proposal that the trade have put forward.
Okay. Cool.
Thank you, Chair. I was trying to search for the PERDA period, but I think it's around about the 27th of March, isn't it? So it's way off the date that we're talking about here.
Okay.
Chairman, I think the consideration was around bringing it back to the next licensing committee rather than just the PERDA period.
Yes, it was related to the licensing committee where we might be able to discuss it. If it then goes on into the next period, we might end up with a licensing committee that hasn't been aware of what's gone on before with regards to that, and it would be better if we did try to do that. I mean, I talked to myself about two weeks and 3 weeks, but I don't see that that's going to make a huge amount of difference, to be honest, with regards to that, because of the way that it's the way that the authority puts out all these items in the paper like that. There's nothing more done with regards to social media or anything like that. We haven't reached that far yet with the issues like that.
Chairman, also, if I could just say that, I mean, it would be entirely up for members to decide how long they want to run that consultation period for. The law, however, says that the new fees need to come into effect within 2 months of the consultation closing. So if you went with a date of, say, the 21st of March, the new fees would need to come into into play by the 21st of May. And I don't believe that there's another licensing committee in that period. So that would be another issue that would need to be overcome.
Yes. Paul?
Can I suggest then that the 2nd of March licensing committee is postponed by 1 week?
Is that possible, Luciana? Okay. Any other members got any comments with regards to that, issues on that? No?
Chair, I think
Yeah.
Julia would just like to pick a point up if possible. Sure.
Yeah.
Hello. Thank you, Chair. Are you happy for me to just make a comment?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, thank you. All I was really going to say was that in my experience in the past, the whatever the consultation time is, we get very little responses to the advertisements, and I can't think actually of hardly any that have come from the public. So certainly what has happened in the past is that we write to the trade individually so that they are very aware of it. And we, as Moira has said, do publicise on the website and community groups as well to try and get some public engagement. And we could also write to the ward members if they felt that would help at all. But hope that may have helped.
Okay. Can I ask how many members here actually use the taxi service that we've got out there? 2 of them, 3. Yeah. No, I mean, I have to admit that putting out an advertisement in the newspaper, and I know that legally we have to do it that way, means that the majority of the members of the public are not going to see it or whatever, or even if they do see it, are in a position to look at that and think, oh, that means I'm going to be this or that, because it's quite a complex range of figures that are actually in there. So it's quite difficult from that point of view. So I'm relying on you as members to be able to think from the issues that you've got there, whether you're happy with those increases that exist there. I know that it's been quite a while since we've actually allowed any increases with regards to that. But we now seem to be actually moving above our neighbouring authorities in some cases. And anything that puts us higher than Reading seems to me that being a sort of semi-rural location, that we maybe are moving a bit too high up the process. But any members got any thoughts on that? Right now, Lindsay?
I think it would depend upon when the authorities mentioned last had their review. If they have all reviewed in the last 6 months and we end up being above them, then I would agree with your comment. If they did it 2 or 3 years ago, then with inflation hitting us at the moment, I would expect the other authorities to be receiving figures. So do we know what the dates? I know you made the figures, but do you know when they did the last consultations?
Chairman, I can't comment on the Reading one, although I think that they do theirs annually. The West Berkshire one was done in November, and the Bracknell one was done in August of last year.
Okay. Right. Well, if you're happy to move forward on that basis, members, then can I have your agreement to the recommendation that we consider the business case and proposals and the committee change the current Hackney Council carriage fare scales? Sorry? Yeah, if you like.
Chairman, it's Sean O'Connor speaking. Before we move on to the next item, would it be possible if I could just one point of clarity on the last item in relation to fees and tariffs? We just, from officers, we just want to make sure that we're looking at the correct figures in relation to the reduction that we referred to in the June meeting. So I just want to make sure we're getting it right. I appreciate that this has gone on for a while, and I just want to make sure we nail it now. And Chairman, apologies for jumping in your meeting yet again.
No, that's fair enough. Are you asking us to provide that information, or you're checking back on what you've done previously?
I can ask when it's good for the. Sorry, Chairman, I can't see what's going on at the moment, so I'm not sure if you're ready for the question, but I can talk about it when you're good and ready.
Okay. Have you finished talking now? Yeah. Okay.
Do you want me to start, Chair?
No. Yes, please. Yeah.
Chair, in the last item 22, we referred to reducing certain fees down to the 2021 charges, and there was a reference to the 23rd of June meeting. I just want to make sure that, that I'm looking at the correct item and the correct appendix. So item 7, Hackney charges, and there was an appendix A in there. And the reduction is quoted as follows. I just want to make sure this is correct. Hackney Carriage vehicle license 248, private hire vehicle license 248, private hire vehicle license with dispensation £228 for all three. After that, there's also the private hire operator licenses as well. So the clarification is whether or not those are the three items we were talking about, or were we considering the operating licenses as well?
No.
If I can direct that question to Councillor Ferris, because he was.
Yeah. It was certainly the three that you mentioned are down to 248. I thought it was 252, but it was 248. I can't remember what we did with private hire.
We didn't do anything for that.
We didn't.
No.
Right. I think those were the three figures that we focused on.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Councillor Ferris. So just to clarify on that.
Right. Okay, members. Now you've had a chance to chat about it. How do you want to move forward on that? Are you coming with any? Are you accepting what the situation is, or you want any change?
Our position is that we're regarding the recommendation to move. I've got the agenda item page. We are happy with points 1 and 2 under the recommendation, but we do have concerns about the period of consultation and whether an alternative date for the committee could be found. I've been told the 10th of March is free, but that might not be acceptable for all members of the committee. So I think we can only move the date longer if we can have a meeting of the licensing committee on, say, the 10th of March. If we can't, then we have to stick with the 2nd.
Okay. Bill, any feedback?
Just one point of clarification. When we're voting on this, are we also including the bringing the time back to 22:30 instead of 23? Is that included within it? To start.
Chairman, if you're going to go with the proposal from the trade, then it would be the 10:30. But if members don't want to go with the 10:30, we could go with the.
Yeah. Are we looking at
as is?
Microphone.
Right.
We had a discussion on the 22:30 regarding 10:23, but we thought it probably better to go out to consultation on that issue because it was sort of on it. I don't know if any of your groups are saying.
No, I think I'd be quite happy with that. I didn't just want to say a yes on it. Okay.
Okay. Right, so we're moving forward on the basis that we originally discussed then. Yeah. So can I see those in favour of the recommendations? Yes. Everybody's in favour of that.
Chairman, could I just ask for clarity then? Are we going for a 3-week consultation or a 2-week consultation?
We would like to go for a 3-week consultation if the a meeting of the Licensing and Appeals Committee can be held on, I believe, 10th of March might be a date that was mentioned to me as being free currently in the calendar. If that is not free and there isn't an ability to find another date, then we'll have to go back in 2 weeks.
Is that enough guidance for you there?
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Right, in that case.
Chairman, can I just make one question?
Yeah, sure.
On page 36, 1.8, just in case this comes up at a later time, about the trade answer requesting consideration of implementing a tariff specifically for things like Henley Regatta. I think that would be extremely messy. I think it would be very confusing for our residents if that was to be implemented. Also, the consideration on the tariffs takes into account the time that it takes as well as the distance they travel. So if it's taking them longer to get there, there is a higher fee. And also there is a fee for waiting time should they get there and the person isn't there. And I think that would cover it. And I'm just concerned that this may come later and, we're not sure where we want to go on it.
Yeah. Lindsay?
Could I make an observation on that? Obviously, talking to the taxi drivers at Twyford, what happens in Henley is under normal circumstances, you get a whole horde of taxis, usually from Reading, turn up. And I know the licensing officers attend the station for quite a few hours of the day. But what happens is that somebody from another area comes along and then charges a different rate for people going up to Henley. And the Twyford drivers are on their current Woking one, and it's been an ongoing problem. I'm sure that Julia may be able to comment on that. That is where that has come from. I'm not saying about the figure, but that is the rationale that the taxi drivers who are regular at Twyford find that they disadvantaged during the Henley session.
Yeah. I'm not sure whether that really comes into the context of what we're trying to do here, to be honest. Yeah, I know. I mean,
no, but it was in the agenda, and I thought it would come to light later, and something we need to take into consideration.
Yeah. Sorry, is that part of what we're automatically proposing if we? Yeah, after the consultation. Yeah. So I think we need to look and see what we get back on the consultation with regards to that anyway, because we're not obviously fixing it at this way. That makes sense. Okay, so we're on item 24, the forward programme. What do members feel about the current forward programme, and are there any issues that we feel that we ought to be adding to the process? Rachel.
Thank you. It was just to point out that, so item 3, which was going to be the outcome of the consultation on the vehicle policy, that will change to be actually reviewing the draft policy. And then I assume that in June, we will then actually review the consultation responses on the policy. And also, could I request that we have a tax liaison meeting specifically in that consultation period, so that we can hear directly from the drivers and the trade, what their views are on that revised policy.
Okay. Are any members happy with that? Agree with that? Yeah, fair enough. Yeah.
And that's the structure of the licensing committee going forward. I believe that we're widening the remit of the licensing committee. Barry, are you able to provide, or anyone officer to Sam maybe, to let us know what we're looking at having the structure of the new committee?
Jack, I don't know. Phil, have you got any feedback on that?
Not particularly any feedback. Obviously, responsibilities of the borough and the committee are going to be greater, because come April we will be responsible for our own public protection and licensing. So there will be greater emphasis on that. And based on that, I'm looking at the March meeting, and perhaps we ought to have something in there about the consideration of what we're about come the bringing back in on April the 1st, just as a side. But no, I haven't got any specifics on what the increased workload will be, but I'm sure there will be because of that.
Okay.
I don't know whether Stephen Moore has anything to add to that. He might be a better position to say what he thinks our workload will be. Sorry,
Yeah.
Stephen Brown. I've got my Stephen's.
Yeah, no, that's all right. It's too many Steves, Chairman, I know. No, I think that's about right. I think we'll have to keep it under review and just see how a lot of it is going to be a little bit sucking to see, because it's the data and intelligence we've got now is based on everything that's happened with the PPP. So we're setting fees and charges based on historical data from the PPP. Things will no doubt change as we take over the service, and I know that the policy review committee, cross-party group, which Councillor Son is chairing, is looking at licensing and looking at other policies. So it's something that will be in the constant review, and we'll obviously come back to the committee and recommend changes as we see fit. I think Neil Allen's got a hand up, Chair.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, thanks very much for that. Just quickly, I heard on the second point, I heard a comment from the floor, I think, about the Henley amendment. And just to make it clear that I think someone said that we'll see what comes back on the consultation and revisit that point. Just to make it clear, and I think the report makes it clear at paragraph 1.14, if there is nothing comes back on the consultation, then what you recommend tonight does go through. So if really what you recommend tonight, you have to assume is what you want to go forward, subject to anything that does come in on consultation. If nothing comes in, then whatever you recommend tonight will be the one that will be the fee that goes ahead. I just thought I'd clarify that point, just so members are aware of the implications of it. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Right. So does that, yeah. How is that going to affect things then, Bill, if that's the case? With regards to the Henley Regatta situation?
Well, if we accept the whole recommendation, it looks as though that would be, we would have to look at special fees for Henley Regatta, and that's something that we would have to look at the time. But we don't necessarily want to agree that at this stage. I wouldn't have thought that we even want to discuss it, do we? Yeah, it would be very difficult. Sorry. Yeah. I mean, I would rather look at that as a separate item rather than taking it as part of the whole recommendation tonight.
Okay. Well, can we go back and say that we would? Yeah, Neil. Neil, what's your view about that?
Neil, are you still there? Can you clarify what you meant in view of what Bill was saying now?
Well, I think if it's the view of the subcommittee that it doesn't want to deal with the Henley matter, then the recommendation needs to exclude the Henley matter. Or I can't really think of an in-between method. It's either in, and if there is nothing comes in on the consultation, then it goes through, or it's left out.
Can it not be discussed at a later date under another heading?
Yeah.
Well, I would rather it left in because it is an issue, and I know that, as I just explained, what happened. Well, we just have to hope there's some comments in, is that what I say?
But on that recommendation,
if we don't include it, it's not included, it's automatically rejected. But then you're saying let's do it on the second alternative. Sorry, we're having a discussion.
leaves it wide open to be charged for anything.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, Paul?
Thank you, Chair. If it was left out and it came back to the 2nd of March committee, then I think the process would be, if something was agreed there, we then go out to consultation again. And then it would come back to the next committees, which is the 23rd of June. And then we may or may not miss Henley anyway. If that's the case.
Yeah. Peter, you want to speak?
If you read their petition, it actually says, I'll read it out. The tariff chart does not include special event days tariffs such as Henley Regatta Week, which could be supplied to the drivers at the time of the event for those specific days. This is an issue that we have all discussed with you at the time of the events on the ranks such as Twyford Station, and explained that because of the traffic situation, Henley taxis operate at a much higher tariff than ours. And then this is the salient point. So it would be appreciated if Wokingham Council could liaise with Henley Council and close the vast gap, which could be much as 150%. So I think that's actually the action. It's not actually defining a tariff, but it's actually actioning us to go and talk to the Henley Council to actually do something about it.
Okay. From the officer's viewpoint, is that acceptable?
Maura, did you want to speak?
Chairman, it is worth pointing out that South Oxfordshire, so with the Henley drivers that they're talking about, don't set tariffs at the moment. It is something that the authority is looking at. So you could speak to the authority, but to some degree they have no control over what those drivers are charging because they don't have a maximum tariff that's been set.
Chair, I just wanted to make the point, if I may, that one of the reasons the officers haven't made that one of the recommendations to go out to consultation is harking back to the point made about the 2015 committee, which asked the taxi trade to put in a business case if they were asking for a rise. And the officers' view was that the business case is not really a business case. It's simply pointing out that other authorities' areas charge more than they do. And that's not really a business case. They've not really explained why they need to charge more, given the point that's already been made earlier this evening that the longer a journey takes by taxi, the higher the fee will be anyway, based on the duration. So for what it's worth, that was the officer's opinion.
Okay. Thank you. Michael?
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. There's been reference to Henley Town Council. I don't think they're the licensing authority somehow. That would be South Oxon, to the point of correction. But I'm just trying to make a question here that if someone's going, say, maybe from Wokingham to Henley or anywhere to Henley, and they could be going for Henley for non-regatta reasons, how do we know that they're going to Henley for non-regatta reasons or regatta reasons? If they're going for non-regatta reasons, they could be charged a higher fee. Surely that's unfair. This is a bit absurd, to be perfectly honest, even having this difference, because it's going to be an absolute admin nightmare. Because people might say, I'm going to Henley, but I'm not going to the regatta. Pretty obvious they are. How do we know how does a driver know that difference? It's going to put them into quite an incredibly difficult position, I would think.
Well, I understand what you're saying, but because of the circumstances at the time, with regards to the regatta, if somebody is going to Henley and they're not going to the regatta, the taxi's still going to be kept held up in the traffic in the same way as it would have been if they were going.
Okay, I mean, yeah, but I could put it this way. I work in Henley, and I could decide, I'm going to get a taxi into work. Could do. Yeah. How do they know I'm going to the regatta or not? And sometimes when you go to work, you might have an event, and it does happen occasionally at regatta. So it's just that's absolutely absurd. I'm sorry.
Well, we're going to be going on for too long on this particular item. It seems to be we're going around it. Peter, have you got something new to say?
I just want to reiterate the point. The petition isn't asking us to do anything with the Henley Regatta. It's just, if you read to the end of it on page 40, you'll see it lists all the tariffs that it wants us to discuss. The Henley Regatta is just an aside point. Say, can you go and talk to the other council that we're asking you to? It's not, I don't see it as part of the consultation.
Yeah, okay.
So can you confirm that it is or is not part of the consultation? Because otherwise we're just talking empty area.
As far as I'm aware, it's not part of the consultation. Yeah.
Chair, can I just come in, because I've looked at the report again, and in terms of the recommendation, it's 1.3 to 1.8. 1.8 being the crucial bit concerning the fees. There's no mention there of Henley, so it is correct. The mention of Henley is purely an aspiration. So I would recommend that if that's the way they're minded to go, then just saying that the recommendation is approved should be sufficient in order to avoid any confusion about Henley.
Okay, fair enough. Thank you. Okay, can we go back to the forward plan now? No further issues with regards to that. In that case, we have no further items on the agenda, and I close the meeting at 8:22. Thank you very much, everybody.